having open mic and open forum discussion sessions. These sessions will still run for the next couple weeks. Mark is going to host them, but he'll be sending out a link to the new site for the actual Zoom meetings. I'll send you a copy of the email distribution list, and if you could just post it on Facebook, Mark, that would be great. And those will be open forum discussions unless somebody has something in specific that they really want to dig into in great depth. And then Mark will, of course, answer all of your questions related to square dance calling and choreography, mechanics, everything else.
Yeah.
With the proper question that every caller knows the proper answer. I don't know, but I'll get back to you on that, and he will. Which is one thing that as a caller, if you don't know the answer, don't make something up, because if you're wrong, you know that's the one question that will always come back to you.
Mark can just sit back and referee.
which is sometimes things.
You'd be like Jerry
Well, ladies
Springer.
and gentlemen, it is the top of the hour. I want to extend a very, very warm welcome and a very big thanks to our guest today, Mr. Jeff Priest, who comes from the Toronto area of Canada. He is an accredited caller coach. He has been calling since he was at least, I think, 6 years old or 9 years old, one of the two.
Yeah,
9 years old. But let's just put it this way. He's been training callers since 1985, which is in some cases earlier than most of us have started calling, started dancing and calling. For me, about 4 years after. He's been working with experienced callers, new callers, journeyman callers. He runs his own schools through the Canadian Callers College. He's worked on several schools across Canada, the U.S., and pretty much, well, as I was saying before Jeff came in, so it wasn't a solicited comment or an advertising comment. If it's not about calling and he doesn't know it, then it's probably not worth knowing. I could list all of the positions Jeff served on provincial in Canada, state, international boards and committees, but then I've got to leave time for him to talk. Jeff has published a number of books on calling. I have put the links up. They are recommended resource material on the Caller Lab website, but you can also obtain the books through the Canadian Callers College, or you could send Jeff an email directly and he can make those arrangements. I've just put the link to the Canadian Callers College there. So Jeff, I'm not going to take too much of your time away, but he's going to talk about one of those topics today that doesn't get enough coverage and doesn't get enough discussion on. Callers tend to talk about choreography, management, site resolution, all these other kinds of things. But the important things in calling are what the dancer remembers. And the topic for today is judgment, because good judgment makes a good caller. Bad judgment means you're out of work. Jeff, thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Mel.
Jeff?
I really appreciate being asked to come back, and glad to be here. You're right. The topic that we're going to discuss, judgment, is not really discussed at a lot of schools. As a matter of fact, even on the Caller Lab curriculum, it's listed as a additional subject. So it doesn't have to be covered in schools. So those that are running full-blown schools, they don't have to cover judgment. A lot of them don't. I am going to do a slideshow, so I'm going to just work with my mouse here for a minute to try and get the screen up. I got to share. And I'm looking for my share
Jeff, you
button.
can record.
No? Okay. I can? Oh, all right. How does that work? Just a minute. Let me do that first. Yeah, good. There we go. All right. And I'm going to take that one and go okay. All right. There we go. I'm working with two computers here, so bear with me every now and again. I'll pick up the wrong mouse sometimes. All right. So the topic we're looking at tonight is judgment. As a caller, as a teacher, and as an entertainer. This is your livelihood. So judgment. On stage, we're going to look at. Off stage, critical. Working with others, very important, and we need a lot of judgment here. Knowing who your customers are, for those of you that came to the session I did on teaching, we've touched on that one already. Professionalism. Private life, choreography, and music. These are the issues or the subjects that we're going to touch on where we need to employ judgment. All right, so what is judgment really? According to Google, because that's where everybody goes today, the act of making a decision or forming an opinion objectively, authoritatively, and wisely, especially in matters affecting action, good sense, and discretion. My wife and I have been blessed with 4 sons. As we raised our sons, we impressed upon them the power of good judgment. We told them that whenever they had a decision to make, they had to ask themselves 3 questions. The first question is, will I or anyone else get in trouble if I do this? Second question, will I or anyone else be hurt, not just physically? Third question, will I be able to live with the possible ramifications of this decision? Those are all things that we need to consider as callers when we are working with a group of people. So if we're looking at our on-stage stuff, our judgment for on-stage, if you look at what you're doing when you get there, there's an expectation. Your dancers have an expectation for you. Your judgment will determine whether you meet that expectation, whether you satisfy that expectation. You're on stage from home to home. When you leave your home to head to a dance, you're on stage that whole time. And when you get back home again, then you can get off the stage. But up to that point, especially if you're being a guest caller somewhere and you're staying with people, you're on stage the whole time. That's a bit of a challenge sometimes. Appropriate dress. Was your decision to dress appropriately? Did you show up in a pair of jeans and an old t-shirt? Did you show up in a costume if it was a costume dance? Did you dress in club colors? Did you dress in a 3-piece suit? Did you dress in square dance attire? Those are the decisions you have to make. That's your judgment. When you're getting ready to go to a dance, your decision is how you want to present yourself to your dancers. Appropriate program. Were you prepared for the program? When you got there, you were informed, I'm hoping, before you got there, that it was a plus dance, or a mainstream dance, or a basic dance. Did you prepare the right program? Did you prepare a program that they were able to actually dance? You know, when you talk about programming, they say there's always 3 programs for every dance you're going to call. The one you prepared, the one you should have prepared, and the one you wish you'd prepared. However, that's your judgment. You need to make sure that you're appropriately prepared for the program you're calling. Did you arrive on time? It is always better to show up an hour early than be 30 seconds late. 30 seconds late to a dance can be an issue. I've always tried to leave myself enough time whenever I have to travel to an event to even include a flat tire. Give myself an extra 40, 45 minutes. If I show up early at the dance, that's fine. I've got my tablet, I'll sit in the car, read a book, whatever. But if I get a flat tire, then I'm not gonna be late for the dance. There was one time I remember, we got miserably lost going to a dance to a place we'd never been to before. And I mean, we got miserably lost. And the club caller was there that night, and we pulled into the driveway just as he was getting his equipment out of the car to set up to call the dance. I got there, we got in, we got set up, and the dance started exactly 2 minutes late. And a number of those dancers have seen me since then, and they have not let me forget that. You know, so that's something that dancers will remember. Those are all judgments that you make, and they're on you. Offstage. So offstage is a whole different aspect, you think, maybe? No, it isn't. Offstage has 2 sides. Side 1, are you greeting your dancers? Do you greet people when they come into the floor or into the club? Or are you just off hiding in the corner somewhere, talking to the same person you talk to every week? What about during breaks? When there's a break, do you actually get off the stage and go down and visit dancers? Do you mingle with people? You get to know them? Let them get to know you a little bit? Those are all judgments you have to make. There was a caller many years ago. Well, he only passed recently, but he was a fabulous caller. I mean, he was booked all over the world. He was a fabulous caller. And everybody thought he was a very arrogant, stuck-up individual. He wasn't, actually. I got to know him quite well, and he was shy. He was very shy. One-on-one, he couldn't handle. He couldn't go up to somebody on a dance floor and just start talking to them. He couldn't do that. Put him in a crowd of people, give him a guitar, he's in heaven. But to face one-on-one people, he was just a very shy person. But he was an excellent caller. And so he continued to get bookings. He was really good. But, you have to decide. He made the decision. He wasn't going to change. He was shy. He was going to stay that way. When he's up on the stage and he's away from people, he's doing fine. What do you do during your breaks? Do you go down and chat with your dancers? At the end of the dance, do you bid your dancers farewell? Do you go by the door and say goodnight to everybody as they leave? Personally, I do not in 3 of my clubs. I work for some executive-run clubs, and those clubs, the vice president's job is to stand at the door and bid everybody farewell. I say goodnight from the microphone. I make sure to let the dancers know that we're dancing next week and that we're looking forward to seeing them all back again. I want them to know that they're not forgotten from the stage. That's my decision. That's my judgment in the way I do that. I know a lot of callers just pack up their stuff and go home. They don't say a word. Club events or outings. This is the second issue of your judgment. When you're at a club event or an outing, a picnic, anything like that, are you the same professional that they all know and love when they see you on stage? Or do you get out there and goof off and be the clown? Just sit with somebody, one or 2 people for the whole duration. You don't socialize with the club members. Those are things that's part of your judgment. Those are things that you need to build into your career. When you're out at dances, not calling, when you're in an open dance and you're not the caller, do you dance the way you teach your dancers to dance? Do you use the proper definitions, or do you get in and do shortcuts? Do you horse around? Do you do the calls wrong? Do you goof off? Is that what you're showing your dancers? Those are the things that you need to be able to justify in your own mind as to what you're doing. Your judgment. That's the way it goes. Working with others. We often get the opportunity to work with others. Caller or a cuer. I'm very fortunate. My wife is a cuer, and often we get booked together. We have a system, and we know how it works. But when you're working with somebody who you don't know, how do you make that work? When you get in there, do you set up your equipment and make them conform to it? Do you discuss with them first how they like the equipment set up? I've called a couple of dances as a guest caller where I've gone in, and the club caller has set up his equipment. He set it up across the stage, and he stands behind it. I can't stand that. I don't do that. I don't like anything between me and my dancers. I like to be up on the front of the stage. I don't get them to move it. What I do is I call from the side of the table so that I can still stand up front. That's my decision. That's the judgment I make. I don't make a big deal out of it when I get there. I just learn to work with it. All right, so that's your judgment. Now, I've seen guys go in and say, "Oh, no, I can't call like this. You got to turn the table. This isn't going to work for me." But you have to decide how you're going to work with others. The stage setup and the equipment. Communication. Do you contact? If you're working with a new caller or with a guest caller or with a guest cuer, do you contact them like a week before the dance? Do you get involved in a discussion as to how you're going to set up the dance? Maybe you're going to dress appropriately or dress the same. If it's a theme dance, you're going to work out your music together. And if you're working with another caller and you put your whole program together and you've got your 3 favorite singing calls in there, and the guest caller calls your favorite singing call in his first tip because you didn't do any discussion, you didn't do anything, do you get up and do yours and see if you can do it better? Do you just change on the fly? If you have communication beforehand, you can avoid those types of embarrassing situations. Knowing your customer. Well, we talked about knowing your customer when we were doing the teaching thing. And knowing your customer is very important in many, many aspects of our calling. But in this particular situation, for your judgment, you need to know whether you've got kids, young adults, or retirees. What if you're calling for a church group? You have all of the above in one room. How are you going to talk to them? How are you going to deal with them? How are you going to speak to them? How are you going to make them all understand? I mean, when you do a kids group, you talk to them very differently than when you're talking to retirees. And when you're doing young adults, you talk to them differently as well. So, you kind of have to build a plan as to what your judgment's going to be as to how you're going to deal with these different situations. Everybody learns differently. We have a cure that we know quite well. He's a retired school teacher, and when he teaches, he talks to everybody like they're 10-year-olds. There are a lot of people who don't like that. But that's his teaching method. That's what he's decided to do. Even though he's working with adults, he's decided he's not changing his teaching method. He's still going to talk to everybody like they're 10-year-olds. And that's his decision. And he's lost answers over it because people are offended. So, you have to decide how you're going to deal with people verbally. And profanity is never, in my opinion, appropriate over a microphone. I've heard callers swear on the microphone. Sometimes it's by accident, but once it's over the mic, it can't be taken back. You cannot take it back. Once you've said it, it's out there. So you need to be very careful about the things that you say, and your judgment will determine how well you deal with people and deal with that particular situation. Professionalism. It has been stated, if you are paid even 1 penny, you are a professional. So what does a professional mean to you? Your judgment will determine how you respond as a professional, whether you consider yourself a professional. When you show up for dances, are you dressed professionally? We had a caller in our area many years ago, and he used to tease people about how good they were or how bad they were. He never said how bad they were, but often what he would say is, well, if you can't be good, you may as well dress good, and you look good, so that's okay. So he would put that through to them that they were appropriately dressed, was basically the comment he was giving them. Do you tell jokes? Are you biased? Do you deal with politics over the microphone? My personal opinion, none of that stuff has anything to do with a square dance hall. And you should stay away from it as best you can. Now, that's my opinion. Jokes. Paul Adams was the only guy I really know who could get away with a joke, and he used to tell blonde jokes. And the jokes that he told were blonde jokes because his wife Judy was a blonde. And he would never tell them unless she was right there beside him on the stage, or at least sitting by the stage. And every time he finished telling a joke, he would always look at her, either smile or wink at her. But he was the only one that I know that could get away with that. Les Greenwood was a very large man out from the London area, and he could get away with jokes, but he just had this face that when he told the joke, he would just put on this puppy dog look, and he would just drop his jowls, and of course everybody would laugh at that, whether the joke was funny or not. By the time they saw his face, the ramifications of the joke was basically past. But my opinion is stay away from jokes, stay away from biases, especially if they're religious, and stay away from politics. The easiest way to avoid all of that. Smile and a handshake. Do you give your dancers a smile and a handshake? I know after COVID it's going to be a fisty bump. It's not going to be a handshake anymore. But those are the things that, people remember. And do you want them to remember you? Do you want them to think of you as a nice person, as a, friendly person? Those are things that are going to help build your reputation. But again, it's your judgment as to whether or not you're going to do that. Some people aren't comfortable doing that. I used to work with a guy that every time he shook hands with somebody, he looked at the floor. He was almost embarrassed. He couldn't look somebody in the eye when he shook hands with them. So, you need to do in your judgment whether or not that's something that you're comfortable doing. If it is, many people appreciate it. Do you walk your talk? Dale Carnegie once stated, "I no longer listen to what men say, but rather watch what men do." Because people say lots of stuff, but in their real life, what are they actually doing? That goes back to when you go to open dances. Are you teaching your dancers properly how to dance, the proper definitions, the proper timing, how to do that? And then when you're out at an open dance, goofing off, taking shortcuts, that's not walking your talk. So do you walk your talk? That's the thing that you've got to decide. That's your judgment. That's the way you build your own reputation. A reputation takes many, many years to build, but it literally can be destroyed overnight. One sentence, one comment, one swear word over the microphone that wasn't meant to come out, they're very damaging. Those are things that you need to be very careful of, and your judgment is going to determine that. Private life. Well, with social media today, folks, guess what? Your private life isn't private anymore. Your dancers still know you when you're out in the grocery store, when you're out at a show, when you're out in a restaurant. Your dancers still know you. They recognize you. And do they see the same person that they know and love when they see you on stage, when you're out in public? Facebook, Twitter, if you're on any of these mediums, are you behaving the way that you would really hope you should as far as being a professional goes? You know, with recent events, social media has really brought about some really nasty stuff lately. The US presidential election, COVID-19, even SSD within our own organizations. There have been people who have been extremely vocal about these issues, extremely vocal, some nasty. So much so that there are people who have turned enemies into people who were their very good friends. You really have to be careful. Everybody's entitled to an opinion. Don't think you're not. You are entitled to opinion. You just have to be careful as to where you voice it if you don't want the ramifications to be damaging. So you got to think about that with social media today. Your private life is no longer private. Everybody is out there. Choreography. Yeah, well, this is the one that everybody ever talks about, is choreography. This is where judgment comes in as far as writing your stuff goes, or actually being up on stage performing, or being an entertainer. Choreography is what you need to worry about. Guest calling. So what do you do when you're guest calling? When you're hired to be a guest caller, you walk into a room full of people, you know nobody, you're a guest caller, you don't know anybody in there. Do you walk into that room and do you just call them, give them the best stuff you've got, and then decide after they can't do it to call what they can call? Or how about when you actually go and you're given the opportunity of calling at a national or a local convention? You get your 15 minutes of glory. Do you go in there and be the entertainer for 15 minutes and give the people a good dance that they can dance? Or do you go in there and look around the room and see a dozen callers that you know that you really want to show off to, that you want to show them how well you've developed your choreographic skills, and you call and blow away 2/3 of your floor because you're trying to show off to these callers? Your 15 minutes of glory just got flushed down the toilet because 2/3 of your floor couldn't dance what you were calling. That's your decision. That's your challenge when you get up there. You have to decide how you're going to perform with these people. Personally, I prefer the KISS method. Keep it spectacularly simple. Be an entertainer. Give them something to smile about. Give them smooth, flowing, danceable choreography. Let them win, and you win. And that applies to both of those, guest calling and calling at a national or a convention. If you're guest calling and you've got a whole evening, your first tip should be the most relaxing thing those people will ever do. And you're going to get to learn how they call, or how they can dance rather, what their skill level is. All right? You need to determine what the skill level is. So when you go in to guest call or you go to call at a national, when you go in there, do you just get up on stage and start sight calling? Because if you do, most people, that's suicide. Because you don't know anybody. You don't know what their skill level is. You don't know how they dance. You don't even know if they're in the right room. When you're at a national, there's a lot of cheaters. You know, people go into a room that they've just graduated from the program and they can't dance it. So you need to go in my opinion, with memorized modules. And there's nobody that can call today that can't memorize a dozen or a dozen and a half modules in any program that they're calling. You go in and you memorize those modules. Well, you can all write choreography as well. Take written choreography, and that's fine too. Take in something that you are not going to be lost on. Because if you go in there and sight call and you pick up 3 or 4 squares and they all go down the tubes, you're down the tubes too. You cannot resolve the floor. If you're calling modules, you know they work. You know they work. Before you get on stage, you know that what you're going to call is going to be successful. The benefit of modules is you get to watch the floor. And you get to see the skill level of the dancers. You get to see who's actually calling or dancing, going through everything that you're calling. All right? When I'm calling in a larger room, you don't have to actually look at anybody. You just kind of look over the floor because it's like a kaleidoscope. And when something is chipped in that kaleidoscope, your eyes automatically draw to that area. So when a square breaks down, you'll know what they broke down on. If a whole half of the room is broken down, you'll know what they broke down on. But if you've got modules, you're going to get the rest of the room back. That's the key. Your judgment is going to determine how successful you are on the stage in those particular situations. Calling for your own clubs. Now, there's a whole new kettle of fish. When you call for your own clubs, they see you every week, week after week after week after week. You've got to keep them entertained. You've got to keep them interested. How do you teach with your clubs? If you have a teaching club, how do you build your degree of difficulty? Do you teach all position or dance by definition, however you want to refer to it? Do you teach it right out the gate? Do you teach the call from standard position and then let them dance it for a week or two and then introduce something else to them from another position? And don't think that because you have 2 clubs of the same program that they're going to dance exactly the same and learn exactly the same, because they won't. You have different people, different skill levels. Those are things where your judgment has to come in. You can't just build a program, a plus program, for example, and have 2 plus clubs and call the exact same program to 2 plus clubs that are in different areas. Chances are one of them will be very unsuccessful. So you have to have the ability to make a judgment on that. That's where your skill level as a caller comes in. So you have to build that program so that it works with the group. Now I have 2 plus clubs. I have a plus DBD and I have a plus. The plus DBD, those people are there because they are interested in dissecting calls. They are interested in seeing all the components of it and how it can be applied. My plus people, they don't even like it from sashayed positions. They like standard plus. That's it. That's all they want. And so those 2 programs, from my point of view, are day and night. They are completely different programs, even though they're both plus. So you have to build your program to suit the people you've got. That's where your judgment comes in, because you have to decide what those people are capable of. You have to decide what those people are capable of. And you have to keep them coming back week after week. Now, granted, we get people in our DBD group that really are struggling very hard. And I have been known to go up to them and suggest that they come and dance in the other group as well. I will never tell anybody to stop coming. I will suggest that they come and dance in the other group as well, so that they get more floor time on the standard positioning call, so they don't have to work as hard. So when they get the DBD stuff, it comes a little bit easier to them. All right? That's my decision. That's my judgment on that particular situation. I've seen callers go up and say, "You don't belong here. Don't bother coming back next week." That's their decision. It's not helpful to anybody as far as I'm concerned, but that's their decision. That's judgment. That is caller judgment. And you're the one that has to be there to make that decision. Dancers don't care. I attended a caller school back in the early 70s. We had 2 coaches. It was a 4-day school. I think we had about 24 students, if I'm not mistaken. And throughout that school, one of the coaches made a comment that has stuck with me for my entire career. And the comment was, "Dancers don't care how much you know. They want you to entertain them with how much they know." That's very true. I believe that to be very true. Dancers don't care how much you know. I mean, I call up to C1. My basic mainstream and plus dancers could care less. They're never going to dance there. They don't care how much I know. As long as I can entertain them with what they know and give them a happy event every time they come out, that's what's going to keep them coming back. So don't think that just because you call all these programs and you're a hotshot caller up here, that these people down here care, because they don't. You need to be able to entertain them with what they know. And that's where your skill level as a caller comes in, because you have to determine how to build the program that's going to keep those people happy. That's your judgment. You've got to be able to look at that and say, this is too tough, this is not tough enough. There's where your choreographic judgment comes into play. And you need to do that on a regular basis. You know, I mean, what do you do with people who have missed 2 or 3 weeks? You just blow past them? Tell them, sorry, you missed it, you're out? No, you have to work with them if you want them to keep coming. That's when you make the decision, or the judgment, to ask them to come in 15 minutes early and walk them through a few calls. That's the easiest thing to do. Get them happy, keep them happy. Or if you can get another couple to work with them at their home maybe the week before, or the day before rather, then they'll be able to come in and be somewhat prepared. Those are all judgments the caller has to make. Those are all things that are involved in your bailiwick as a caller. So you need to consider all those aspects when you're looking at your programs, your guest calling, your nationals. It's a huge, judgment is a huge category, and there are so many things that you have to look at when you're doing your judgment prospects. And the last topic for tonight is music. We're going to discuss a little bit of music. Yeah, again, it's a 2-part issue. Part 1, your programming. Well, your programming is a big deal. How do you program for your customer? You got to know who your customer is. All right, but let's just say, for example, you're doing a church group. I don't think you're going to want to put the singing call, "The Devil Went Down to Georgia," in your program for that particular evening. That's probably not going to go over too big. What if you're doing a father-daughter dance? You're doing a brownie group or a girl guide group. Dads are out there with their girls. Don't think you're going to want to add "Who's in the Strawberry Patch with Sally." Or worse, you're not going to do the singing call, "I'll love you tonight in my dreams." You know, those are the types of situations where, when you're working with youth, Disney tunes are wonderful. They're really wonderful. And there's quite a few singing calls out there for Disney tunes. And you don't have to be a singer to do them. I mean, the floor will sing. They'll help you with it because they know them all. And if you're doing a church group, you want to make sure you've got a few religious singing calls in your case so that you can present those. And again, you don't have to be a singer to present those. You know, our record producers have done a really good job on many of our theme musics that you don't have to sing them. The music will do all the work for you. You know a few tagline words, that's really all you have to add in. You know, so make sure when you're doing your program that it's befitting of the group. You have theme nights for your clubs. You know, you've got to build a theme night for your club. So your judgment is going to be, well, am I going to actually play this whole thing so that I've got a song that suits the night through the whole night? Or am I just going to put 2 or 3 in that I can squeeze together? Those are your judgments in programming. Those are the things you need to look at. Tempo. This is a biggie on a lot of callers because some callers just set their tempo at 1 tempo and that's it. They walk in, they call the dance. And you know, if your tempo is too fast, you wear them out, they go home early. If your tempo is too slow, you bore them and they go home early. Either way, you lose. So you really have to adjust your tempo to fit the particular group. If you're calling for kids, you're probably going to want to run your tempo at about 128, 130, 132 beats per minute if you've got kids. If you're calling for retirees, you're probably going to want to bring that down to 122 to 124. You're going to be able to keep those people dancing for most of the night. I remember Randy Doherty was talking at Cololab one year, and he was doing a presentation on singing calls, and he said that he had a group that these people were so old and moved so slowly that he had to run his music at 116 beats per minute. And 2 hours later, he called for another group, and that group, he had to bump it up to 126 beats per minute. And you say, yeah, okay, so that's good. It's good he can do that. It's good he recognizes that. Think about calling. Your timing just changed 10 beats per minute. That's huge. That's huge. You have to be able to adapt to that. So if you're going to move your tempo around, you've got to be darn sure that you know that music really well so that you can adjust your calls timed properly. Because if you're going to move the tempo, you're going to move the tempo so that people can actually dance to the music. If you're just going to leave your tempo at 126 beats per minute and boom, that's it, you're going to call and you're going to give them extra time or extra beats to do the music because it's too fast for them, you're not doing them any good or yourself any good. But if you adjust the tempo and the dancers can dance with the tempo and the correct beats, you're golden. So you need to be prepared for that. That's your judgment. Are you going to adjust your tempo? Or are you just going to leave it at 1 and let them work for it? And I know callers that leave them at 1 and let them work for it. I know callers that adjust their tempo. I'm one of them. I like to see my dancers actually dance. So I will adjust my tempos. Advent of computers was great because it really lets you adjust them quite nicely without really affecting it. When we had turntables, we had to adjust our tempos. If it went slower, it went down an octave, and you got to sing completely differently or call completely differently, utilizing your voice. So that's something that you need to work on in your judgment and your decision as to how you're going to adjust or not adjust your tempo. Style of music. There's a biggie. Style of music for most people. When you first started calling, you went to caller school and they gave you probably a dozen records. And you figured out fairly in short order that there was at least 3 or 4 of them that you could actually do, 3 or 4 of them you'd like to do, and 3 or 4 of them that you probably gave away to somebody else because you couldn't do them at all. But when you do a style of music, your style of music has to suit your personality. And I'm not talking about the Disney tunes for the kids or the religious tunes for the church. I'm talking about your everyday weekly clubs. Your music has to suit your personality. That song has to talk to you. It has to do something for you in order for you to be able to present it as an entertainer. Don't just go out and buy a piece of music because you heard a caller do it and he did a really great job on it and you really liked it. That was him. You are very unlikely to be able to emulate that exact same thing. When I buy music, my dancers don't see it for at least 2 to 3 months. That's how long it takes me to get comfortable with it, to learn all the instrumentation in it, to know all the music that goes with it, and to be able to call to it. I very rarely will pick up a new tune and go out and call it that night. I'll admit it has happened on occasion, but not often. The majority of my stuff I work with before I ever take it out to a dance. That's my decision. That's the way I judge my music because I want it to come out right. I want to be able to utilize the music as best I can to have it either highlight my voice or replace my voice, one or the other. And the only way to do that is to work with it. But if the music doesn't say anything to me, I can't work with it. If it doesn't mean something to me, I can't work with it. I don't do a lot of heartbreak songs because I don't have a broken heart. I've never experienced a broken heart. So, it's those songs to me don't talk to me. I can't do them. I love love songs. Love songs are great. I do a lot of those. And I do a lot of rock and roll. And I do a lot of big band. Big band is my favorite because that music talks to me personally and I can present it. That's what you need to be able to do. That's when you're looking for your music, that's the style that you want to go with. Something that you can present comfortably. Those are your decisions that you have to make. Don't just pick up a tune because somebody you heard do it and you thought, gee, that's a great tune. I'm going to get that. I'm going to do it just like that. No, you're not. It's not going to happen. You're not going to do it just like that. Those are all part of your judgment as far as music goes. So part 2 in judgment, now we get on the soapbox, is digital piracy. Digital piracy for the last, well, many years now, since the age of computer in calling, has been a huge issue for our record producers. In fact, a number of them have gone out of business because they just decided they were no longer going to produce music at the expense that they were paying to have virtually no sales. Digital piracy is something that is illegal. It's hurtful to the record producers and to the authors because there's no royalties paid on it when you guys are swapping music. It's just a bad thing to do. Asking somebody for a piece of music that's on their computer. You walk up to a guy who was calling a dance, hand him a thumb drive and say, I love that tune. Can you give that to me? And he either will or won't. That'll be his judgment. If he does, that's bad because you've both just broken the law. But you're getting a piece of music that you didn't pay for, so the record producers didn't get their share, and the royalty people didn't get their share, and you're going to go out and actually use that music. And that's just not right. That's a judgment you have to make. I know there are a lot of callers, and there's a lot of big-time professional callers, well-known professional callers, who swap music. They're not supposed to do that. And as far as I'm concerned, they're not walking the talk. I can honestly say that every piece of music I have on my computer that I use to call, I own. I bought it, I paid for it. I'm very, very strong about that. And I don't think that we should be sharing music at all. I think it's a very poor thing, and it's unfortunate that it is so easy to do. If you're offered music, somebody comes up to you and says, this is a great tune, I think you should do it. You got a great voice, you should do this. Here, let me give this to you. Have the guts to say no. That's a judgment call, but have the guts to say no. Because if it's good for you, go out and buy it. Go online, order it, get the download, and go ahead and do it. But don't take it because somebody's just giving it to you because it's free. I mean, it's not theirs to give away. It really isn't. Trading music. It's just as bad. It's actually worse. I have actually seen callers walk up to each other with a thumb drive with all their hoedowns on their thumb drive, and they swap drives. And they just doubled their inventory of hoedowns. And they both broke the law so incredibly. It's amazing. Now, you know, there's a legal aspect to all of this, and unfortunately, our record producers, I don't think, have the ability or the money to be able to audit everybody's computer. If they could, I'm sure that they'd be taking a lot of computers. But if you're calling in a public facility and you're licensed under SOCAN or you're licensed under BMI and ASCAP, and there happens to be an inspector in that place and they challenge you, you're looking at some very heavy fines if you don't own every piece of music that's on your computer. If you can't validate that you've paid for it, that you have a receipt, then it's considered stolen. And it's been said, I don't know if it's a fact because I've never been involved in it, but it's been said that SOCAN has never lost a libel suit for royalty payments yet in their entire history of being in existence. So it's not something I would ever want to be caught on. So, you know, I strongly recommend that your decision, your judgment on music is that you want to own, pay for everything that you use in your business. It's your business. So you need to be able to have it to call with it. And that is all I've got to say on that. Any questions? We got lots of time here. So I'm open for questions.
I've got a few things that have come in the chat.
All right, let me shut down the screen here. There we go.
Just for everybody, you used the word SOCAN a couple of times. That's the Canadian equivalent of BMI ASCAP, or for the Europeans, GAMA, or whatever country you're in, the various music copyright association, legal people that deal with copyrighted music, or
Yeah.
performance licenses. So
We actually
it's
have
just an acronym dealing with the Canadian ones.
we actually have three now. We have Resound, SoCan, and they joined together and became a company called Intandem. So we're in negotiations now with Intandem to create a single licensing fee. We'll see where that goes. Who knows?
Yeah, I remember dealing with that in the 80s.
I know. Yep, you did so.
Yeah, we
Anything else on there?
negotiated $65 a year for every caller. Didn't matter what you did, you paid it, and that was it.
Yep.
I wish those days were still there. It was nice and
Me
simple.
too, because now it's up to, callers now are getting invoices. And a caller in Ottawa sent me a copy of his, and he's been levied $310. There's a couple of different callers around in out west that have been levied $190. So just they're all over the map. So we're trying to
Yeah.
standardize again into something that's regular.
Yeah, well, many months of negotiations with SoCan to get what we had. I don't know why it changed. Well, actually, I do know why it changed, but that's a story for another time.
Yep.
Um,
Any other questions there?
I've got a few, and there's one I'm going to end with putting you on the spot with one. But a comment on reputation. It says positive is a long feeling for dancers. Negative is what? Negative is immediate and almost permanent, which I think you pretty much said.
Yep.
On modules, the question was, you're saying don't use sight. I was taught use modules to gauge the floor, and once you see what they can do and you start knowing the dancers, use sight but stick to isolated sight. Your opinion on that?
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, when I go into an open dance, dancers I don't know, I always use modules. I'm quote a site caller. I've been a site caller for over 35 years, but it has limits. And if you're walking into a room of unknown people, unknown skill level, I mean, years ago when we used to go to the U.S., I used to travel a fair bit through the U.S., and they had 3+ programs. I don't know if they still have them today, but they had plus, or so they had soft plus, plus, and full position plus. That's what they had. And so when you were hired to call a plus dance, you had to ask, what plus program is it? And depending on who you were talking to as to whether they were a hot shot or not, the majority of them always said, oh, we do full plus, we do full plus. You know darn well, most of them didn't. So I developed a whole number of plus modules that I would walk into these dances with and call. And I would start off with my easier ones and I would work my way through. And in that first tip, I would be able to determine, 1, the actual level of the floor, 2, who I could actually count on to watch, and 3, am I going to use sight at all tonight? Because I've got a whole pile more of modules, and if they're breaking down on this, that, and the other thing, but it's not consistent, I'm not going to work on sight. I want these people to remember me as a good caller. I want them to have me back as a good caller. So I'm not going to blow the floor away and myself away by watching 3 or 4 squares, because that's pretty much all you can watch, really, no matter how many you've got on the floor. And if they go down, I go down. I mean, there's no way out. You can say, forgot what I was going to call, square up. Well, you can only do that once. So you've got to be careful. And yeah, if you want to try isolated sight, if you've got people you can trust, go for it.
The next one is, what do you do, or how do you approach dancers who are not ready or capable or miss class? I know you touched on it, but I think it's more of a specific question. I've got a couple that hasn't showed up for class, or I've got a couple that are obviously in the wrong hall. How do you approach them?
It depends on the situation of where I am. If it's my club, then I will, if they've moved into let's just say they're a mainstream dancer, they've moved up to the plus group. Used to be years ago, you couldn't go to a plus group unless you were actually invited. You were not allowed into a plus club unless you were actually invited by the club. So mainstream, you did basic mainstream and you stay in mainstream until you were invited to go to a plus club. Nowadays, plus seems to be the place everybody wants to be. And what I do is, if I have dancers who come into plus and they're not ready for plus, I will express to them that it looks like you're struggling a little bit with some of these calls, maybe why don't you come and join the mainstream group as well? Dance both groups. Don't leave one. Dance both groups. And you can come back. We'll bring you back as an angel on our mainstream group. So you can help out with the mainstream guys, and you can get those calls right down pat so that learning the new calls is going to be that much easier for you. That's the way I would address that.
I think the second part of that was class-based. It says, how do you deal with couples that miss classes? I've personally been in that situation where I've had couples that have missed 4 weeks of classes.
Yes,
That's
okay.
too far to catch up. How do you deal with them?
Well, and we've done that actually with, it works better with executive run clubs than it does with my own personal clubs. But we have a couple of couples that are willing to have people over to their house, and they will walk them through the calls. They're the more experienced dancers that we let do that. That would be the way we address that is we can get them together with somebody else so that they can actually go through the calls and get caught up and brought up to speed, as it were. Or if they can't do that, then we bring them in early and we work with them. Most of the calls we can do with one other couple. The majority of calls we can do with just two couples.
Yep.
And if they're the ones that they've missed, then we only need one other couple to come in early. And it's a very doable thing to do, and we don't usually have issues getting one or two couples to come in early and help out.
Now, I have one which I'm just going to share an experience before I put you on the spot with the last question.
I want to share an experience too.
I used to call in a synagogue. I also called for a Mormon group, and I also called for a very strong political religious, let's just say a more right-wing Christian group.
Okay.
And we'll leave it at that. Mine was, I had a very unusual situation. I was calling in a synagogue in Ottawa, and I always stayed away from, I do a lot of gospel music and a lot of Christian music as well, and I always shied away from that. And I had the cantor, who was also there, and come up and ask me to do some gospel songs, which was very, very unusual and very uncomfortable in the synagogue. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I will just share is if you're ever in that situation, or you do have those, look at the gospel music you choose. The two that I chose was Ezekiel Saw the Wheel and Swing Low, because they're Old Testament. They fit into all of the religions.
Yeah.
So just a little sideline. The question that I had for you is one that is now a political hot potato topic.
Uh-oh.
It was based on an experience that dancers had. It came up on Facebook, and they want to know how you would handle this. And that is, a dancer went down in a square, and the caller just kept on calling while the dancers did it. They put the circle around them and everything else. And that's the ECMA, emergency call for medical assistance.
Yes.
Now, the program says the caller and the dancers just keep doing what they're doing while aid is rendered.
Correct.
As I understand it, that is the correct way, and they surround, and then if they need to signal help to stop, they will do that, but you let them deal with it in the square and you keep going. That's the procedure as it's written right now. That's the protocol.
Correct.
How would you deal with that is the question.
That's exactly how I would deal with it. We have, actually, when we ran the T&D convention, we put that sheet of paper into every folder that every dancer got, so that they knew that that was the emergency call. And if somebody goes down in a square, then the rest of the people form an arch. One person attends the person who's down, whether it be a fall or a trip, or they passed out, or they had a heart attack, whatever. They go down. And the reason for that is because you don't want a crowd. You don't want people to all stop and crowd in. And that's exactly what's going to happen. All right. Mm-hmm. So what happens is when that circle is done, the one person who's attending the person who fell down or tripped or whatever, if they're able to be made mobile, to either be moved off the floor or get back up and start dancing again, because sometimes it's just a trip, right? And they can get back up and they can play again, and that's fine. If there is something more needed, then one of those people is to get the caller's attention or somebody in the room's attention. When we had the conventions, we always had somebody in the room with a radio who was named as the room monitor, their attention. And oftentimes they would be the one to go to the circle. because they had a radio they could call a 911 if they needed it. All right. But by and large, yes, that's the way it happens. And the reason is because if you get a big crowd around there and this person just happened to trip, they are going to be so miserably embarrassed. They're going to, I mean, they stop the whole dance because they tripped. You know, it's just clumsiness. It's not a big deal. If it's more serious than that, they still don't want everybody hanging around them. You know, so they don't want a big crowd. And that's why that was designed. That is supported and sponsored by Color Lab. It was supported by T&D. We use it at all of our conventions. It is provided at all of the Canadian Nationals. It's the same sheet that we put into every package for the dancers.
Yep. And the last comment was on jokes. There are a lot of callers that jokes are their reputation.
You know Paul.
Yeah, I know Paul.
You know all the
Ed
blonde
Foote
jokes that Paul used to
yeah.
tell.
Ed Foote is another one that is, he's got the reputation of the only person to actually have an entire convention of about 20,000 people all groan at the same time at a really bad joke.
And well, the funny thing is, Ed has absolutely no sense of humor.
I know.
None. I mean, Ed doesn't laugh at anybody's jokes, including his own.
There are a lot of callers that tell jokes.
Yes,
it was brought up, that was as well, I did a session a little while ago on Father's Day here, which was, we started the session with bring your favorite bad dad joke.
Yeah, okay.
I have no problem with jokes if they're part of the theme and they're in good taste, but the question comes up is, if you are going to tell a joke, how long should it be? Because some callers just go on with a joke.
Yes, that's true. I don't tell jokes. I'm not in favor of them. I have been in a room where the joke has gone on for longer than the tip, which to me is just so miserably annoying. It's incredible. It's like, get on with it. Let's dance. I would say if you're going to tell a joke, it should be a sentence and a punchline. Boom, that's it. You know, no, I would say no more than a minute. A minute is a long time for people to be standing around listening to you say nothing that's going to really interest them. Personally, my opinion.
Yeah. I look at it as there's three particular things for people who are bad at math. One is timing, two is delivery.
Yep.
Right, that ends the questions that have come in on the chat.
Okay, I have one piece of information I want to share with you on Judgement, because I mentioned T&D convention, and I was calling in the challenge room one year. I had 4 squares, which is about average for our C groups up there. And I was called a sequence. 2 squares did it absolutely perfectly. 2 squares broke down. And in one of the squares that broke down, one of the guys puts up his hand. He says, whoa, 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 you can't call that from there. That's not legal. You can't do that. And I kind of looked at the 2 squares that just waltzed through it perfectly without any problem at all. And I'm thinking, well, they got it. Like, how come you didn't get it? And I was really in kind of a situation here that I had to come up with something. Fortunately for me, well, fortunately at least I thought initially, the next caller in the room was Lee Kottman. He was sitting on a chair beside the stage. Lee wrote the call. So I said to this guy who's got his hand up, I said, all right, hang on a second. I said, I have an idea. Why don't we ask the author? I said, Lee is here. Lee wrote this call. So let's see what Lee's got to say. Lee, is that legal or not? All I wanted from him was a yes or no. I said, Lee, is that legal or not? I wanted a yes or no. Lee stands up, walks out in front of the stage, and looks at the guy and says, sir, if you can't dance that sequence the way he called it, you have no business being in this room. I could have crawled under the table. That was not the answer I was looking for. And I certainly wouldn't have. He was right, but I wouldn't have said that to him. But that was Lee's.
He's very blunt.
He's very blunt. There's no question he's very blunt. But, you know, I mean, that kind of startled me probably as much as it startled everybody else in the room. That was not what I was expecting. I was looking for a yes or no, just support that the sequence was good, you know. Judgment, you know. Maybe I shouldn't have asked him after all, but it worked out okay. The guy stayed. And he also stayed for the next session and danced with Lee.
Guido has just posted the ECMA poster. I put a copy of it in there, but Guido's posted it up there in several languages, and if it's
Oh,
not in
cool.
a language that you already have or you don't have, just let him know and he'll arrange to
Great.
get
Thanks,
that
Guido.
sorted
That's
out for you.
terrific.
Thank you very much for that, Guido.
Yep, excellent.
Right, the floor is open, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very, very much, Jeff. Excellent
My pleasure.
presentation, as always. And as I said, this is one of the topics that is always of concern to me. And there's a lot of the, shall we say, background topics that are taught at schools. The focus is always on choreography, on sight resolution, on modules, on whatever the focus is. But the reality is, as very, very simply said, dancers really don't care about the choreography. They care if they can be dancing to it, they can be moving to it, and they can be entertained. And all the stuff that goes in the background of making a good caller is what the dancers remember. Not so much the wickedness or the cleverness or the integration or the intricacy of your choreography. Who you are is what they remember, and that's why they'll ask you back. And why those are just ancillary topics or nice to have or possible topics on the Color Lab curriculum, I have no idea, because they're more important than the choreography sometimes.
Well, they are, in my opinion, for sure. They're called additional topics, and they're not part of the regular 11 curriculum items,
Yeah.
and they should be. It really should be.
Jeff is an acclaimed Color Lab credited coach. He's been doing this for many.
I'm not accredited by Color Lab.
Oh, you're not accredited.
No.
Well, you should be. Quite frankly, you should be one of the ones that's accrediting coaches, in my opinion. But that's a different story. He runs the Canadian Callers College, and he's been doing this for many years, teaching callers professionally. So, if you have questions, now is the time to ask them. Take advantage of it. Yes, John.
Yeah, just your opinion, Jeff. I was told or informed at an early stage in my calling career that if you're a caller and you are visiting another club, or if you're the caller for that session and you are letting another caller do a bracket or a tip, as you call it, and you're on the floor and somebody asks you to dance, you dance with them. You don't say no, because dancers love dancing with callers.
I would agree if you're capable. I'll clarify that. I have vertigo, so I don't dance a whole lot anymore. I will not dance with anybody except my wife, because if I turn and I start to fall, then I would feel terrible if I took somebody with me. But yes, generally by and large, if you're asked to dance, if you're sitting out while you have a guest caller and you're asked to dance, it's appropriate that you do participate. But if you have a legitimate reason not to, don't be afraid to say no, but do clarify.
All right, Kendall, you're in the background there. I'm not sure if your hand is up or you're just resting on it. Did you have a question?
I don't even see it.
There I go. I'm unmuted. No, I didn't have a question, but I attended one of Jeff's Collar School, and one of the many things I was thankful for is I did a guest tip at a club. Everybody in the club was dressed exactly the same way. You could not tell any of them apart. There was no way I could do any sight calling. So it was 100% modules for that tip.
Yep. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's
It
good.
reminds me of my first tip in Heidelberg. Black and white, all identical, matching club costumes. It was like a flock of penguins moving around in unison, and I was totally lost.
Well, for those of you that were at the when I did the teaching session, you may recall the situation I explained when I called at the University of Toronto. I used to do a lot of groups at the University of Toronto for the students, and I was asked to come in and do this student dance. And I got there, and as is usual, the caller goes in, gets all set up, and then they bring the students into the room. While they're bringing the students in, I'm talking with one of the teachers, and I discover that I've got 200 students there. I'm the only man in the room.
Oh, God.
There's only 2 of us that speak English. They were Japanese. The second person that spoke English was my translator. And fortunately, I had a second microphone, because if I hadn't, it would have been real interesting passing the mic back and forth, because I gave the definition and she gave the definition. Now, I work from the center of the floor when I'm doing a big teach like that, so I was in the center with a headset on. She was on the stage with a regular microphone, and when I gave a definition, she repeated it. She gave it to them in their language, and then the call was the call. I didn't change anything with the calls. But yeah, I had 200 Japanese ladies who had never danced before, and it was rather interesting.
Hence, that really emphasizes the importance of good communication with your people hiring you before the dance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'd done a lot of student dance. I never queried it. They just said, we've got 200 students, and this is the date, this is the hall. I said, okay, fine, I'll be there. Because generally speaking, it was always blended. It was always guys and gals. You'd probably have 60% females and 40% males, but it was enough that you could actually do some work with it. So, but anyway, it was fun. It was a fun time.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the top of the hour. So if you do have other commitments, by all means, this session will be recorded and it will be posted up on the OC Callers website. Thanks to Mark Hart, who will be looking after everything for us.
Thanks, Mark.
He looks after all of the websites, the ITs. The copy of Jeff's presentation and his notes will also be there, as will a copy of the ECMA poster. Jeff has a number of books written out that you can get from the OC Callers website. I have put a link to not the OC Callers website, the Canadian Callers College website. I put the link in the chat. It is one of the listed Caller Lab resources, but it's a little awkward to try and find it if you're searching through the Caller Lab database sometimes, unless you're used to it. But by all means, have a look at it. I put the link there. I want to say a big thank you to Jeff for coming in again. And as I have said previously, I will not be here for the next 2 weeks. I will be moving houses. We've sold our house. We're moving to Lavington while our new house is being built down in Mexico, which is Victoria for you Australian people. They all call it Mexico. I have no idea why. And
is it still winter down there?
Mark Hart has graciously agreed to keep this going. He'll be posting the link on Facebook, and if I can get the email address to him, sending out the list, he's going to try and get a hold of perhaps Corey Geist to come in and talk about dancing with handy-capable dancers and all that goes into that, and some of you have had experience with that, so it should be a really good session. So, thank you very much, Jeff, and you are welcome anytime to come in.
Thank you. My pleasure.
More than happy to have you anytime. And
yep,
the floor is open. Jeff will stay. Kendall's got his hand up for a question, so we'll start off with Kendall.
Oh, okay. Any recommendations on how to deal with, like right now I've got 35 to 85-year-olds.
Okay.
How do I deal with the tempo?
You have a challenge. See, you're going to want to adjust it a little bit for sure, because you're 85-year-olds. What's your mix? Have you got more 35-year-olds than 85-year-olds, or are you a senior heavy?
It's average age is probably about 55.
Yeah, you should be okay to pick a mid-range tempo, somewhere between where you're going to go. I mean, if you had just your 35-year-olds, you'd probably pop it up to about 126 to 128.
Yeah.
But your 85-year-olds, you'd probably be down to 120 to 122. So if you ran 124, 125, that should satisfy the needs for everybody, basically.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Was that a question, Francis? No? Anyone else have? Roz? Yes.
Quiet.
Roz and then Howard.
I was just thinking about that. Could you, in your evening, program a couple of fast brackets? Because if the 85-year-olds will probably want to sit out sometime during the night. So if you said, oh, the next one's going to be a faster bracket, maybe that might help.
Yep, you could do that for sure. In the old days, we used to call those a hot hash. We'd say we do a hot hash tip in the middle of the night or at the end of the night. And that would take all the young ones and give them something to kind of show off with. But yeah, that would be another way of handling it for sure.
A comment, this is an observation. This is going back to one of the Toronto festivals. You were in a very similar situation, Jeff. Jeff calls in about the 124 to 126 usual comfort zone, if I remember
Generally.
correctly.
Correct.
And he's got this ability to make the slowest ballad sound incredibly fast, and the fastest song in the world sound incredibly slow, smooth, and easy. And when you develop that talent, your presentation has a lot to do with it. Howard did the same thing at the dance in Holbrook. The way you fill in a song, the way you present a song, the way you present your pattern, the way you fill your pattern can change the whole feel without changing the dancing tempo, so that the older folks and the younger folks are all getting the feel of fast or slow, but it's all still danceable. And 124 to 126 is the ultimate smooth range area that is capable, and that's what you should build your core around, and up and down on either side of it as appropriate. That's my opinion.
If you can add words, and your voice, people will dance to your voice. You can speed up a song just by adding words. You don't have to touch the tempo. And in fact, there are 2 singing calls, and for the life of me now, I can't remember the second one, but the first one is King of the Road. And King of the Road is a dual tempo song, or a dual signature song. The opening, the middle break, and the ending are 4/4. The figure is 2/4.
Yeah.
But if you sit there with a metronome, and I've done it, and tempo that song, the entire tune is tempoed at 126 beats. The entire tune, even though it's 2 different signatures. So when you get to the break, or the figures, and you can add extra words, and it makes it seem like it's really, really fast. But it isn't. It hasn't changed at all. The tempo is identical. So that's what Mel was saying, that you can use your voice to increase or decrease how fast the dancers will move. They will dance to your voice. You can still have them dancing to the rhythm of the band, to the beat of the music, without any problem at all.
Yeah, just to clarify for everybody, King of the Road is on a number of different record labels. The one that we're referring to, I believe, is Gary Shoemake's Chaparral 303.
Yep.
Yeah, Chaparral 303, and it's still available.
Yep. It's a great tune.
Did anybody? Yes, Alan. Sorry, Howard was next, and then Alan. Howard.
Thanks, Mel. Great presentation, Jeff. Well done. I loved it. Just a question. Back in the day when we used to have records, we were able to provide that record to members of our clubs and then have an amateur callers night in a few weeks.
Right.
But because we physically gave them the record, we were not able to call it, which meant it was quite legal.
Correct.
We now have this digital age where, how do we get around that? Because there's no guarantee that if you give them a copy of that digital piece of music and say, practice this for your amateur callers night, but when we finish, erase it, we have no way of knowing that they have erased it. How do you go about that?
That's a challenge. I have 3 callers in my area who I've let call in my club, and what I do is I let them listen to some of my tunes, and then I tell them how to purchase them. So I don't give them a tune. We did have a Goofers night one night. I didn't call it a Goofers night. We called it a talent night. And none of those people were going to be callers. They were just up there because they wanted to have a go at it. And in that particular situation, I gave each of them a stick with a tune, a piece of music that I do not use. So it's not being used anywhere else. I collected the sticks all back when they were done, but they had it to do while they were doing it. I don't believe that any of them kept it because none of them have looked at calling or considered calling. So it's a very touchy situation. Tell you something that happened in our area. One of our callers decided to retire. He was completely digital. He sold his laptop to another caller. Sold his collection of records to a different caller. That is absolutely 100% illegal. The guy with the records won because he's got everything he bought and paid for. But the guy with the laptop has got a whole laptop full of music and he doesn't have any of the originals to go with it.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
I was in a very similar situation when I moved here. Well, I think you saw my record collection at one point. I had about 10 to 15,000 different records, which all but my carry-on records were lost in transit. And
Ouch.
it was a relative nightmare, and I could not replace any of them because I had total coverage for loss, which meant everything had to be lost or you didn't get anything, and not everything was lost. Alan Kerr is up there, and I had the very good fortune of visiting Alan. Alan had about 200 of the records that I had, and we went through it, and he's got a massive music collection as well. And I said, this is not a problem, but where we go is on the advice, I contacted the copyright people here. I explained what the situation was, and they said that is not a problem. We deal with square dance callers all the time. This was actually my first really good experience with the copyright people, and they just asked for a list of what had been provided so it could be documented. And as long as you're open and honest about it, it's not really a problem. When we go through that, because I had purchased this, it was on my inventory, on my moving thing. That's all they asked for was, here's the list of records, and it wasn't all completely inventoried, but there was enough there that they just gave benefit of the doubt. That was not a problem because I had purchased the originals. These were not originals. This was a copy of an original, but they were absolutely fine with that. It is one of the biggest things, and I think I saw Bob Elling in here a little while ago. He is one of the record producers. He's bought a lot of these things. Having music is a treat, and it is a custom that is part of our activity. But to keep this activity alive, we've got to keep the activity that provides us with this music alive.
That's right.
There's a lot of callers right now that are buying karaoke tracks and they're skimming them down for that. Doing a little research, buying karaoke tracks and skimming them down and cutting them back and modifying for square dancing is also illegal, even if you own the track, because you are not performing the karaoke the way it was bought. You're modifying it, and then you're making prop on a modified record.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's still in the gray area. So it's something to be very cautious of. For the cost of records, record producers have a very good deal. Now you can listen to all these things digitally online, and for anywhere from $5 to $7 for a good piece of music is not a big price. And when you start thinking about it, you're going to use, 100 records in a year, or 100 pieces of music over the course of a year, maybe more. But 100, that's not a big price for calling. And if you're a full-time caller, all of that's tax deductible. But if we want to keep it alive, support our record producers and do what Jeff says. Don't copy. If you've got the records and you make a recording or an MP3 of your favorite record because it's not available, there's no harm in that as long as you've got the record.
Oh yeah. No, you can make all your own backups. Just don't share them with people.
But if you are going to be in a position like the position I was in, before I used any of that stuff, I made sure that I contacted them. I said, this is my situation. Can I do this? Yes, it was fine. And I found somebody that was able to help me. And as long as I kept them appraised, they had no problem with that whatsoever. So if you're open with them, they're going to be open with you.
Yep. Yeah, even the record producers actually will be pretty good with you if you have an issue. I had a tune that one of my students really liked, and they were able to call it. I mean, it meant something to them. They were able to deal with it. And so they went online to buy it, and it was no longer available. So I contacted the record producer, and I said, this is the situation. Can I have your permission to make a digital copy to provide to this student? And the record producer got back to me and he said, I'll do you one better. He said, I'll send you a digital copy, just pass it on. And so that was how we addressed that. I mean, that worked. It was no longer available, but he still had a digital copy that he could pass on. And so that's what we did. So, I mean, it's sometimes all you got to do is ask the question. And I mean, these guys they're not hard-nosed. I mean, they're just in business, and they want to keep us in business. And if we don't keep supporting them, then
we all go out
it's
of
going to
business.
go away. Yeah. You talk about the death of square dancing. It's not going to be the loss of dancers. It'll be the loss of music.
Yeah. Now I'm Actually, shock is, as you know, we've had a couple sessions here on the SSD program. Jeff mentioned in his session that SSD has caused a number of very controversial discussions amongst friends, which are no longer really that close on friends as to what it was.
No kidding.
I'm surprised nobody has asked, but SSD is working for some. It's not working for others. But another thing that comes into Judgement is because it is one of these programs that is going along and a lot of people are putting a lot of weight and a lot of power behind it, it is here to stay. It is it's an acknowledged program for Caller Lab, but one of the things that I've had a few comments on is callers that are asked to come and call the SSD program and they tone it down to a very, very easy basic program, as opposed to an SSD program, or vice versa. They call everything except, and they just call a solid mainstream program without the 16 movements that are not on the SSD program. There is a difference in the program, and this is what comes down to judgment. It's no different than if you're asked to call a dance where, and I think you've been in this position, Jeff, you're asked to call an open dance, but there's 6 or 10 movements that are not on the list for the student hall or for the newbie hall or something along that line.
Yep.
It's the same kind of issue that you have to deal with Judgement. So if you'd like to share your thoughts on that, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion.
We used to run, years ago, when we had big numbers in our basic class, we used to run a monthly basic dance, and it was a progressive dance. Mm-hmm. In those days, we used the Caller Lab teaching order. Now, for those of you who have my books, you don't have to do that now. You can teach in any order you like. But we used to use the teaching order, and we would have the dance, and you would be able to call up to here. And I was amazed at the number of callers that couldn't stop. They couldn't separate those lists. They knew all the calls, and they just called the whole thing. And that's a challenge for a caller. They shouldn't have accepted the dance. That was their decision. They shouldn't have accepted the dance. Mm-hmm. But they did, and they blew away part of the floor. And if you're calling a dance and you're hired to call a plus dance, and you go in there and you use, load the boat, reel the deuce, spin chain, exchange the gears, follow your neighbor and spread, and then you don't use any other plus calls because those are the primaries, those are the ones that they all hear. My opinion, you've cheated everybody because you're there to call a plus dance. Call every call on the list. You should be able to call every single call on the list up to and including A2 at least once in a 2.5-hour dance. Every call, without any problem at all. That's what you need to do. And if you're hired to call a level, then call the level. If you're hired to call a mainstream dance, don't give them basic with slide through, scoop back, and walk and dodge. That's not mainstream. You got to include all the rest of the calls to make it a mainstream dance. So you need to be prepared. There's your judgment. Were you prepared when you walked into the dance? Did you make a decision to go in and shortcut the thing, or did you make a decision to go in and give them an entertaining evening with everything they expected to hear? Because that's all it is. They expect to hear it. If you said to any dancer, and I will stand behind this, if you said to any dancer, name me every call in the Plus program, they would not be able to do it. We talk to our challenge dancers. We say, name me all the calls in the challenge program. And first thing they start with is the challenge call. And I say, whoa. The very first call in the challenge program is circle left. Sure. You got to know everything. So if you talk to any Plus dancer and say, name me all the calls in the Plus program, it includes basic and mainstream and Plus. They just want to hear the words. It's the words that they'll recognize. You got to make sure you include them in your program.
And with that, I'd like to just stress what Jeff was saying earlier about modules. I've seen 4 dances advertised. One was SSD 5, one was SSD 8, and 2 were SSD.
What?
No, and that's the way they were advertised because that's what was in their area. And I personally think it's great. I'm not for or against SSD. It is a program, and it is a program level. But what Jeff said on modules is extremely important, and it's no different than when I was asked to go and call a Plus dance down in the States when they said it's the Plus program, but we don't do these movements. So I had to go through my entire work and pull out any modules that I was going to have up on my paper or now my computer screen that didn't include those. So if you're asked to do a dance, and let's say, Francis, you're traveling in North Carolina, and you're asked to do, and they asked you to come and call a program for SSD 8. Well, hopefully they're not putting you on the spot in the moment. They give you a date, and you can sit there and you can pull out a bunch of SSD level 8 modules, look up what the program is, and be able to call the dance at the level that you were asked to call. And that's where the strength of modular calling is important, because once you have that, then you can get back into site calling when you know, or then you can start with the isolated site. But you have to know what you're calling.
That's my opinion. That's the biggest problem with caller schools today, is that they're really focusing far too much on site. When I do my schools, my students all have an opportunity to push their checkers and write modules. Don't they, Kendall? They all have to spend time writing sequences, and then they have to call them to make sure they work. I believe that site calling, my dad's favorite line, site calling is a caller convenience. It is not a dancer necessity. The dancer necessity part is they have to get to an Alaman left or to home. And if you can't do that by site calling, then don't site call. And if modules works for you, great. If writing, when I first started calling, I wrote my sequence from home to home. I didn't use modules. My dad was a module caller, but when I first started, I wrote my sequences out in full from home to home. And that was it. And then I got into modules. I did a lot of mental imagery. When I was younger with my dad, we'd go someplace in the car, we'd play what we called Who's On First. And that's how I learned to use mental imagery. But there are so many other methods. Site calling is not the key here. And there are situations like this with the SSD 8 or the SSD 5. You don't want to use site because your mind is going to roll through that list and it's going to come out and they're going to say, nope, you can't do that one. That's not on the list. Can't call that. So you need to be prepared. And modules are by far the best way to do that. Kendall got a hand up.
What do you mean by SSD 5 or SS?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is that the fifth call and the eighth call on the program? Is that what that means?
No.
No.
The SSD program is written week 1 through week 12.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So where you see something advertised SSD 5, that means you've done all the calls up to and including all the movements in week 5. And that's just a method of advertising. It's like basic is listed basic. If they say basic 1 or basic 2 or basic is everything, basic 1 or basic 2. It's the same. Square dancing is very, very different than a lot of things, because when you advertise a program, you advertise all movements on that program, and that's what is to be classes included, as opposed to round dancing. And it's always a big controversy because you'll get phase 2 plus 1 or phase 2 plus 3.
Yeah.
And you never know what the plus 3 is.
You can only add 2. Otherwise it becomes the next phase. But yeah, we've had this discussion. And it's it always tickles me that, they can do a phase 3 plus 2 dance. Well, if you're a phase 3 dancer, how are you supposed to know the two phase 4s? That's the thing. But there are only in justification of that, there are a limited number of phase 4 figures that are brought down into the phase 3 program that are considered add-ons.
Yeah.
I'm not a round dance cure, my wife is. So, I kind of understand why they do that, or how they're able to do that. But it's like, we're going to call a plus dance, and we're going to call it plus 2. We're going to take 2 advanced calls and bring them into the plus program. Yeah, no, you're not. That ain't going to fly very far at all. So it's kind of it's been a battle for years.
But as Jeff was saying, a lot of this falls into the unsung thing of being a real good professional caller, and that's using good judgment, common sense, and logic where it is applicable. And it's got to be situation relevant. Any caller can call. Only a good caller can entertain. I just got word, Mark has been chatting in the background. If he can set it up, we probably will have a Zoom session next week and the following week. Mark will set them up. Mark is talking with Corey from, as I understand, and he'll send out the email to those of you that get the emails and put it on Facebook. But talking about dealing with handy-capable square dancing, modifying your square dance programs for success and entertainment at different levels. But it may be a couple hours later than our current sessions. But he'll put up the new timings and get all that. Is that correct, Mark?
A half hour later.
Oh, a half hour later. I thought
Yeah.
you said 1 to 2 hours later.
No, a half
So
hour
what'll be
later.
the starting time?
Okay, so
Mark?
it'll be the normal starting time plus 30 minutes. So for me, if you just add 30 minutes onto whatever your area starting time is, that'll be when it would start. And if Mark will set that up, please have a look on Facebook in the newbie callers and the callers in training. He'll post the link there, I believe, Mark.
Yeah, I'll post.
Done.
Yeah, I'll post it there, and I'll put it in the email addresses when you get them to me.
Yeah, I'll send all that to you today. So that'll be really good, and I want to say a very, very big thank you for that, Mark. Mark is going to be hosting the next 2 sessions while I'm in the process of moving and establishing a new house and getting all set up. So very, 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 once again, thank you to everybody for coming in, and thank you again, Jeff, as
pleasure.
always. And I would definitely love to have you back once we get started in the new season towards the end of November. The floor is open, anybody. If you have any questions, comments, queries, or you want to look at some other aspects and pick Jeff's brain while he's here.
I have
I
a
shouldn't
SSD. I have an SSD module that I tried to use the other night and it didn't work.
Okay.
Okay, what is it, Linda?
It is heads reverse the flutter wheel,
Yep.
heads lead left,
Yep.
all veer right,
Yep.
Yeah.
Ferris wheel.
Okay, it's uphill. Yep.
No, wait a minute. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. No, that's the wrong one. Start over. Sorry about that. I was looking at the wrong one. I don't have my glasses on.
Oh,
Okay.
now we're good. Now we're good.
Okay, here it is. Heads past the ocean.
Yep.
Extend,
Yep.
swing through,
Yep.
swing through.
Yep.
There's a fancy balance in there, but all 8 circulate.
Yep.
Single hinge,
Okay, we're in a corner box wave now. Hinge. Yep.
scoop back,
Yep.
2 ladies chain.
Okay, that is where your problem is.
That's where the problem is.
Yeah, you need a hinge and a ladies trade.
Yeah. Sorry, I just realized.
Yeah, that's not going to fly.
Let's make this just a little bit easier here.
Was there anything that came after that, Linda?
Yeah, having the boys run is not going to. I mean, you can't do a 2 ladies chain after the boys run. You could.
No.
You got to have the boys run a reverse flutter wheel.
What came after was chain them back and all promenade. 2
Whoa.
ladies chain them back and all promenade.
Well, it was written by somebody who doesn't understand flow. After the scoop back, it was boys run. Then you could have had lines up to the middle and back. Or do your hinge, Mel.
Yeah.
What? Oh, is
You're
this
trying to do like a chain down the line, but that's not going to work either.
What
No.
if you had the boys fold behind the girls and had 2 ladies chain?
That would work.
That'll work, and you can chain them back, and you promenade your corner.
Right.
But what level of SSD are you calling though? That's where your issue is.
This is at the end of the manual. It's
Oh, okay. Well, then I would go with what Bob said. After your scoot back.
You get 2 choices: boys fold, ladies chain her back, or boys run lines up to the middle and back, ladies chain,
Okay.
chain and back.
Okay.
And that's not a module, but that's a singing call, I guess, or a corner progression.
Yeah, it was a singing call module.
Okay.
Okay, you're
Did you get
adding
it off
you're adding
the
extra
lab?
beats though with the
Did you?
the boys fold. You're adding 2 extra beats. That's all. You just have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
That's what I would do if you were doing that.
Did you get it from Collar Lab?
Yeah, I did.
That explains it. A lot of those stuff doesn't work. Serious.
Yeah. Yeah, on the SSD program, if you're using a lot of the choreography that's in the SSD program with singing calls on the initial release, and it is still being revised, there's some of the singing call figures that time out at 30 beats of music. They expect the callers to do the filler and the flump. They're just giving the meat. There's a lot of other things, and they're not usable as written. On
Okay.
on that particular module that you have there for the SSD, I would do after the scoot back, boys fold, girls turn through, boys reach in, courtesy turn, and promenade.
Okay.
I would have the
For
girls.
that, I mean,
turn-
if they're good for the scoot back, I would have them do the hinge and then scoot back again. You got a
Yep,
boy and a girl.
nice.
You got the girls going in, or boy and a girl going in.
Right.
There's lots of variations you can do, Linda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's put that in the chat for you. And of course,
I like the turn through and courtesy turn. That's good too.
so what did you say there? Hang on.
What you got on the end there?
Yeah, there we go. So after the scoot back, hinge.
I said a hinge and scoot back again. You got a boy and a girl going. Now you can swing corner and promenade.
Well, I don't know how many beats were used so far.
Well, ladies chain back is going to be 8 from lines, and the scoot back that you're adding is 6, and the hinge is 2, so that's your 8.
Yeah.
So it should equal.
Yeah, don't worry about the timing count on terminations. Go with your timing lists and your dancers list, because sometimes a swing will be 4, sometimes it'll be 6, sometimes it'll be 8, but terminations has one count. It also doesn't count, for instance, if you do swing through, girls circulate, boys trade, each one of those is counted at different timings, even though they are concurrent, so you have to bring your timing down.
Yeah.
So it's only a guide. And as Bob was saying, there's a lot of things that you can do. Once you get to here, sorry, swing through, circulate.
You have if you have a good repertoire of zeros and equivalents, particularly zeros in this situation, then that's where you want to employ them at that point. You can inject those in anywhere.
Okay.
Mel?
So once you get past your circulate, you're basically in a corner box ocean wave.
Right.
So everything after that, and if you remember our last session, look for things that are non-changing. Hinge, scoot back. Touch a quarter, scoot back. Hinge, scoot back, boys in, scoot back, girls in. All of those are fillers at the end, which add flow and add feeling to the music, but really don't. They're just saying, go away from your partner, come back to your partner on the same spot. We're filling in time before you do the swing and promenade, which is all square dancing is, really, when you think about it. But those are the kinds of things that you can play with and modify. When you get into these kinds of situations, a corner box ocean wave, I know you've done the swing through, but any of those standards, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, centers, pass through, swing through, spin the top, slide through, any of those quick modular endings will fit in at the end of that corner box wave. What's really important is as you walk your dancers through, you try and recognize those formations. The ones that I call fixed points, partner lines or corner box. Once you see those, you know you've got yourself a little module or a get out.
You can do a swing through there, centers trade, or end circulate while the centers trade, turn through and swing corner promenade. There's all kinds of stuff you can do from there. That changes your quadrants, so it gives them a whole different view.
Okay, thank you.
The one I like best, well, I don't know where the time, oh well. Never mind.
See where they swing the corner there? That's a whole different view than where they were swinging before.
Yeah.
You just, and sometimes you'll need to tell them full promenade.
Yeah.
If you've got an SSD floor or a basic or a mainstream floor, not really a problem. If you've got a plus floor, you pretty much have to say
full promenade.
And full promenade, because they will stop at home.
I say promenade all the way.
Okay, what was the one you were going to do there, Bob?
Okay, from where you're going to do that first scoot back, you do the hinge.
Yep.
Scoot back. This is a favorite of mine in the singing call. Boys fold. Ladies turn through. Star through and promenade.
Oh, that's nice. And you could do that on a mainstream floor and call it a slide through and promenade. And
well, you can do that
as long
as
as you
an
get the
SSD
promenade
floor
out fast enough, they'll do the slide through properly. If you don't, they won't.
And if you find out you got extra time, you just say boys trade twice and promenade.
Or you can say promenade home and swing.
Or you could, well, back when I learned how to square dance, I was taught when you got home, if there was extra beach, you swung.
You swung. Darn right you did.
You did. That was part of the class.
Yep, it sure was. That was in the
Nobody
days when
does that.
everybody did swing.
Yeah, and my wife and I would swing maybe 6 times around.
Ouch.
Yes, and Guido has just put into the chat, especially if you're doing a really good driving, entertaining song like Randy did one when he was doing Red Red Wine. He comes in and he plays the consummate drunk, does a whole stage presentation that he goes through, or he'll come in pushing the rubbish basket, sweeping the floor in the beginning of the dance, and then get up on the stage and call. It's all part of his show and performance. As Guido said, if you've got the extra time, just call swing and promenade after the circulate, and then tell them to just face the stage and watch me sing.
I love it.
And as Jeff said, it's like square your sets up. You could probably get away with that once, maybe twice in an evening.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to do that every song.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Well, if you got a rip-roaring song, you could say face the stage and clap your hands and just sing.
Yeah.
Let them keep the beat. They'll do it.
Oh yeah, they'll do it.
Yeah. And just so everybody knows, Linda, that's an excellent little get in there to a corner box or a corner box wave. Heads past the ocean, extend, swing through twice, all 8 circulate. That is a nice, beautiful flow. It takes you from right-hand side, uses the whole floor, back around to your standard ocean wave, or your standard corner box, step to a wave. It's a beautiful little
Yeah.
And it feels like it's, and I always look for things like that, especially that use the floor, because how often do we use heads square through or heads touch a quarter, boys run if we want an alternative? We get there. Find things that will use the floor to do the same thing, and your dancers are going to be very happy. It doesn't have to be overly complex. I also did like that get in that you had here when you started that. Where are we? Let's just reset that.
Reverse flutter wheel and lead to the right. Or left.
Yeah. That's a good square through equivalent.
Yeah.
And guess what? We're in exactly the same spot.
Yep.
Instead of a hinge, I'll probably do a do-si-do or something in there first, but touch a quarter, and now we're in exactly the same spot. Scoot back, hinge, scoot back again, add your filler, swing through, instead of boys trade, centers trade. Now you can do your scoot back.
You know, it's funny because we always talk about overflow, but yet we all call swing through in the center's trade, and nobody considers that to be overflow. I mean, it isn't. The dancers do it all the time. Yeah. But theoretically, it's overflow.
No, it's not. It's
sure it
only
centers are trading. They're going a full circle.
Yeah.
I
looked 360 degrees is not overflow as long as you don't have a continued movement. If you have, for instance, swing through, centers trade, all 8 circulate, that's definite overflow.
It certainly is. But that's we have an A1 call like that has that as part of the action.
Yeah.
It's definitely
5 quarters, anything over 5 quarters of a turn, even if it's a big looping turn like a Ferris wheel or some 5 quarters to me is hitting the overflow button.
Like the next call there has to be centers run so that you can get them going the other way. You wind them and you unwind them.
Or
hinge.
Or hinge. Yeah, hinge works. Yep. As long as you wind them and unwind them, you're turning them the opposite direction. Got to let go of that left hand.
Oh, no. How about this one?
How about boys cross run?
Cast off is good, too.
Or no, girls cross run.
The boys are going to fall down any minute now. Way to go, Mel.
I actually remember getting...
You call that on the floor, they'd be throwing tomatoes at you.
Okay, just as a note, this is one of the little things on Taminations that's coming out in Colorama as well. When you start, if you click on a dancer, like if we click on number 1 lady, notice how she's got motion. Okay, but if you look at the number 1 man, let's just play that. Okay, now watch this. Right, left. Oh, right. When you see something like that, if you start seeing little circles like this develop, rethink your choreography.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a judgment thing.
I have another question about, we had centers trade and scoot back. Who's doing the scoot back? Everybody or just the centers?
Is it from Motion Waves? What was it from?
No, in the routine. Yes. Swing through, centers trade, and then there's scoot back. Who should do the scoot back?
Everybody. Otherwise, you would say center scoot back.
That's right. A scoot back is divine unless you use the and to link them. If you say centers trade and scoot back, then it's still the centers. If you say centers trade, scoot back, it's a split action. It's everybody would be doing the...
I would call everybody scoot back, just to make it very clear.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. And this in itself is actually a whole thing dealing with judgment. Callers, I've said, you've probably heard me say this a lot of times. If you give the dancers an opportunity of choosing 2 things, for instance, centers trade, scoot back, they have a choice of 2 things. Is it the centers or is it everybody? They will invariably choose the one that you do not want. And it will always be. So if ever you can give the dancers that little bit of help, there's your ocean wave, centers trade, everybody, scoot back. It doesn't take any more timing. It doesn't take any more command execution timing. It doesn't take any more dance timing. It's easy to fit, and it's good for dancer clarity. They win. They'll succeed. Away you go. And they'll get used to it. And then if you do change it somewhere later on, for instance, just call everybody trade, just the centers scoot back. Now, we're still doing a swing through, something along that line. You've added that little flavor of just the centers. The dancers will succeed at it. It's a left hand. It feels different, but you're not doing anything different for you as a caller. You're giving different, not difficult.
Yeah, and you're giving helper words, not definitions. Like, I have no problem giving dancers help. I will not recite a definition to them. But if I have, let's just say we have a mixed scoot back, it's boy and a girl, I'll say scoot back. It's boy and a girl. That's all I'll say. Or if I've got the girls going in, I'll say scoot back. Go, girls. They'll know. I'm not going to recite the definition to them. But I will help them. If they're not accustomed to doing a scoot back with the girls going in, Why would I want them to fail? If I'm going to call something that they're not accustomed to, it's on my shoulders to make sure they're successful.
Guido has put a comment in the chat, which is actually quite good, and it deals with when you have those 4/4 or the full turns in motion. There's always a discussion whether or not anything more than 3/4 turn is overflow. Swing through boys trade or swing through centers trade. Is that overflow? My personal opinion is it depends on what the next call is.
Exactly.
Guido has very succinctly put, you have overflow when dancers get lost in the turns, i.e. at the start and the end of a call. But if the dancers have a goal, it will not be overflow, provided that you follow it up with something that breaks that flow. So swing through, centers trade, that's a goal because the command of centers trade is given before the swing through is executed. It doesn't feel. If you call swing through, centers trade, and have them do that stop, and then you do something that's got, end run, Ferris wheel, whatever, it will create that overflow feeling because of the stop action. Or it'll give that feeling of overflow, even though the kinesthetics is the same.
Yeah.
Mickey,
Well,
I just wanted to say congratulations. I saw that I think you were elected as the International Callers Rep. Is that correct for Caller Lab?
Yes, I was elected to be the representative of Germany on the IAC and Color Lab. Yeah.
I thought you were international. You're representing all of us international callers now.
You're supposed to.
Yeah, of course, but
see,
yes,
now
in the
I
advisory committee, we're all representing.
But wait a minute, though.
now, I wanted to put this out there, and I wanted to put this to Caller Lab because one of the things that I see in Caller Lab, it is a very U.S. centric organization, and okay, that's fair enough. That's where the hub of it is, and that's where everything is going. But Mickey, you're the international callers rep, which means that you also represent all the American callers, because for us in Australia, the American callers are the international callers. For them in Germany, us Australians are the international callers.
Mel.
So you basically represent everybody now, Mickey. So your word is law. End of discussion.
Now you try and sell that to Caller Lab. Hey, I was chairman of that committee for 10 years, and the rule was anybody living outside of the USA is part of the international committee.
Yeah.
USA is not part of the international committee.
Yeah,
Although I was quite surprised to read that that they've had Zoom meetings every 2 months, because I've never seen anything on those. I've never been invited to one, and I'm Canada, so I'm part of the international committee. So it'd be interesting. But,
yeah, I think they had it that all the vice chairs and chairs are meeting regularly.
Oh,
it's
just
it's
chairs
not
and
an
vice chairs. I
yeah,
got you.
they're
Okay.
committee meetings that go.
All right, just the vice chairs and chairs. Okay. I took that to read that it was everybody was invited if you were an international caller or an international member of Caller Lab. So anyway, that's good. I was really glad to see that that's happening, because it's something that's really needed. But how do you deal with the languages? With all those,
We all speak square dance.
that's good.
No,
Good answer. Good answer. How long did you have that one prepared?
Now that you're done with the sequencer, can you close that so I can see the screen?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. Didn't know if we were
I was just going to ask Linda. Did that answer your question there, Linda?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Well,
we
ladies and
all
gentlemen,
speak.
go
We
ahead.
all speak the English language, so
Oh, that's good.
and we really have the whole world is there. I mean, we meet and it's really Japanese, Australian, all over Europe. We've got Great Britain, Sweden, Germany. We've got Canada and the US. Yeah, so it's really international, right?
Doug in Russia. You got Russia.
We're working on Russia. We got Czechoslovakia, and we have Doug Makalik get in touch with Russia.
Okay.
We're also working on getting Taiwan into the boat.
What about Prague?
And
Is
so
Prague
we're
in
looking for new ways and new contacts in regions where Square Dance just started, and try to get them into the boat. Yeah.
Are you going to tell the Americans that, sorry, this is the international group?
I think
Okay.
all of it is-
I'm just
Colin
stirring the
is
pot now.
listening to what is
Yeah,
happening
you're always
around
stirring the pot.
world, right? I mean, we have big discussions as well on programs and what is. We're just working now what is happening in every country. We have documents put out and surveys. How is the Square Dance activity working in each country where Square Dance is involved already? And we have that presented by the local representatives or vice chairs to the committee, and which is put in documents. And so everybody's learning from everybody. And I think Color Lab knows what's going on in the world.
Yeah, that's good.
I would hope. There are those that would argue that point, but I would definitely hope so.
And
Remember
definitely everybody can get involved in Color Lab, become a member in the other committees, where we really can set things, which is the mainstream committee, the plus committee. Everybody's invited to be there and participate in discussions and votes, of course.
Good. I remember one year when I was chair of that committee, and I stood up at Color Lab to announce, the results of our meeting, and I said that there was at that time 612 U.S. callers as members of Color Lab, and so they have the biggest base. That's why all the votes get swung by U.S. because they have the highest number of members. And I said, if we could get all of the Japanese callers to join Color Lab, they would outnumber the U.S. callers 3-1, and we would be able to change that association dramatically. We just have to get more of our international callers involved in Color Lab to. I mean, that's why Japan was able to get the AB, or the Part 1 or Part 2 of the basic program. They had enough people to swing the vote that it took the clout, and that's how they got it. So
I mean, just remember what strong vote came over the.
What's that?
From out regarding the Target 2000. I mean, everybody outside the US would say we would not go and work with that. We have an entry level which is mainstream, and we will keep that. Yeah. We're not participating in those plans, and they were dropped. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
Hi, Guido.
Yeah, my microphone didn't seem to work. Anytime I talked, I didn't have anything.
Well, they say that about me all the time, but my microphone is usually working.
Yeah, but when you talk, you have the yellow frame. I didn't have it for quite some time. This is part of the test messages I put in. But somehow my microphone switched over and said, well, you have a new mixer attached to your computer. And it switched from the internal microphone to the mixer, and there is no microphone there yet. This week I got myself a treat. I bought myself a new mixer. Where is it?
Oh.
It would take me a year to learn how to use all those buttons.
Yeah, no kidding. You need a pilot's license.
You don't need that many buttons. You just put your cable in one of those jacks, and just that column is the buttons you need.
So it's like the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise, just a bunch of flashing lights and buttons that look good but do nothing.
Yeah. Well, I could hook up 10 microphones in it. So this is 10 columns of buttons. But when I hook up a microphone, it's just one column I need. It just looks impressive. And you can do a lot of things that are impressive, but you don't need most of that. Most of the time, at least.
Mark, I just sent you an email with the timings and whatnot for next week. But I'll post that in the chat as well.
Well, speaking of timing, I have to say a really big thank you to Mel, who told me 2 days ago that Australia's had a time change and this event started an hour earlier than what was in my calendar. Because otherwise, I would have been very late.
Well,
That's why I missed you.
It was in the email, but as I've been finding out, people just look and say, Mel Wilkerson is inviting you to a Zoom session, and they just go to the link. They don't read the rest. So I put it
Guilty.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so
Anyway,
I'm just going to have to change the Zoom link in it to my Zoom link.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll send out to everybody, or yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I posted it in the chat as well, but as Mark was just saying, that Zoom link, you'll have to look at the one that's. If you get it by email, you'll get the email document with the new Zoom link, but you'll also have a look on Facebook in the newbie callers section or in callers and training to get the Facebook link. We've been trying to get a hold of Corey to come in and do a couple sessions with us, because he deals with the handicapable, dealing with all of the problems, the challenges, and all of the things that you have to consider when you deal with audiences like that. And a lot of that really emphasizes everything what Jeff has said today about judgment, because there's a lot more to judgment there.
Yeah.
So I wish I was going to be here for that session, but I will be in the process of moving houses on that particular day. So have a look. I put in the new time changes, but essentially it's the same time, just a half hour later.
Yeah, we have our time changes the first week of November on the 7th, and then we're back equal again. So, but I didn't realize that you guys changed that much further ahead of us.
And if you
You have a
Australia's
nice
always
snowy background in your back there, Mel, but you don't have a lot of snow there, do you, right now?
You know, I'm amazed. You're the third person that said that and says, oh, because I made the comment. I says, yeah, that was just, I went outside to take a picture last night, and everybody has said, you don't have snow there. Nobody has commented. They're all commenting about the snow, not the fact that there's 2 moons in the sky.
No, that's okay. 2 moons is normal. I'm used to Star Trek and Star Wars. 2 moons is nothing.
So when you turn 100, you're the next candidate with Besa to go up in the air.
Well, I'm beginning to think that Jeff Priest is like what's his name, the Dick Clark of square dancing there. Well, you think about it, Jeff. I mean, you've been now calling for just over 50 years, and you still look the same as when I met you.
God, have I always looked this old? When you first met me, I had hair.
That's true.
Yeah,
but you were in the process of pulling it out, trying to teach us.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I'm 56 years this year calling.
Wow.
A long time. And I've been at it. I've never had a break. Been at it the whole 56 years, which is kind of cool. But it's fun. It's a passion. It's something I love to do, which is great.
You can always tell when there's a lot of passion involved in an activity that you enjoy.
Yep.
You guys were talking about the singing calls, right? With the King of the Roads?
Yep.
Chaparral. I think the other one you probably meant was Up a Lazy River.
Up a Lazy River. Yep, that's the other one. Correct.
Right.
Thank you. I could not think of it either.
No, and yet I do it. I mean, I do it a fair bit actually. It's a great tune. I love it.
So does it do the same thing?
Yeah.
Four
Yeah.
times?
As Guido pointed out, there's 2 things that happen in those songs, and Jeff said it as well. Although your tempo on a metronome stays the same, although your timing stays the same with beats, you've got to change from 2/4 to 4/4,
Right,
and
the
a
signature
slightly
change.
different rhythm change with the instrumental that makes it feel like you're dancing fast or slow, fast or slow, but the timing itself is exactly the same.
Yeah, well, on King of the Road, on the figure, if I'm not mistaken, they bring in a rolling banjo. And it's the rolling banjo that makes you think you really got to run to keep up.
Right.
And you don't. The tempo does not change. It's straight through.
The tempo changes, the timing doesn't change.
Yeah, no, the timing changed. It's a 4/4 signature to a 2/4 signature, but the tempo remains exactly the same all the way through it.
That's just fooling the non-musicians among us.
Yeah, another thing is, I think on yellow polka dot bikini within the figures, you have a similar thing where the music seems to get faster in the middle of the figure.
What tune is that?
Yellow polka dot bikini on Royal Records.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was recorded by Norm Wilcox.
Right.
That and Cold Cold Heart were his two that he recorded.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if there's no further discussion, I've got my wife out cutting the lawn right now and trimming the verge and all that other kind of stuff, and probably casting me dirty looks out the window, but
Probably.
no, she's absolutely fantastic because I'm not allowed to do that as yet because of the spinal surgery. But if nobody has any other comments or questions, I hope to see you all in about 3 weeks. Just a reminder, Mark Hart will be with us next week. The session will be a half hour later, and he'll be sending out the link in the email to those of you that are on email distribution for this. The notes and the PowerPoint presentation and the video recording will be posted on the OC Callers website. For those of you that don't get onto Facebook, just copy and paste the link for the next meeting. It is in the chat for everyone. That will be the meeting Zoom link for next Sunday's session. So if you are able to attend, please do. And I hope you're all enjoying these sessions. Once again, a big thanks to Mark Hart for doing everything that he does in the background to make these things happen. And a very big thanks to you, Jeff, for coming in again. And I hope to have you back when we kick off again.
Look forward to it.
Give all of our best to Andrea, and I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the year.
Yeah, thank you very
before
much. You too. Have a good move. Hope it all goes nice and smooth. Don't lose any records.
Good night, all.
Good night, all.
Most of them are on the computer, but I'm carrying those in my car, my records.
Yeah, good idea. Okay. Take care. Good night, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.